A video game is the culmination of every single form of art. Coders, concept artists, 3D modelers, musicians, writers, directors. It goes on and on. Each contributing artist has their own perspectives. The final product is something that happens organically. It evolves and changes over time. Not everyone has the exact same intention, but every piece of the puzzle is important and requires mastery of a specific craft. I think a good artist knows how to let things unfold naturally in a group effort. People ask complex questions about certain aspects of a game, and the devs will respond with, "Because that's the game." Which is profound if you think about it. During the PS1 era, developers began pushing the limits of storytelling in gaming. Konami was at the forefront with games like Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill. Directors like Hideo Kojima were looking towards film for inspiration, attempting to create a cinematic experience as early as Metal Gear on the MXS. The 3D capabilities of the PS1 would give them just enough room to start blurring the lines between film and gaming. Cinematic cutscenes and mature storytelling creating an experience that felt fresh and exciting. While Kojima was breaking new ground with the tactical stealth action of Metal Gear, Konami had several in-house teams working on other projects. Castlevania was moving into the 3D world, and Konami was looking to branch out even more. Capcom had struck gold with the survival horror series Resident Evil in 1996, with the use of pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed camera angles. The visual style of the game was extremely cinematic and film-like. Tense gameplay with puzzle solving, resource management, and backtracking. It made the world feel real and lived in. But while Resident Evil leaned more towards tight gameplay and action, Silent Hill would take a more deeper, introspective approach, drawing inspiration from cult Russian cinema, 90s TV, and avant-garde directors like David Lynch. The first Silent Hill played out more like a tightly woven horror screenplay, while Silent Hill 2 would dig deeper into the David Lynch style of non-linear introspective storytelling. Both games demonstrate a masterclass in writing. It all started with a ragtag team of developers who would find themselves working together on a project with no expectations and no corporate suits casting a shadow. Team Silent. Team Silent refers to the core group of developers that worked on the first 4 Silent Hill games, most notably Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. Some of these devs were working on other games, and sometimes the roles changed or evolved between titles, but there was a defined group that mostly stayed intact through the 2000s. Legend has painted them almost like a band or rock star group of talent. People have made videos trying to debunk the existence of Team Silent, but I don't know why. Let the legend be the legend. Silent Hill 1 released in January 1999. After 3 years of development, Konami's contribution to survival horror hit the shelves and changed gaming forever. Silent Hill is praised for its graphics and detailed textures. It received a greatest hits in North America and positive reviews across the board. CGI cutscenes were painstakingly crafted over 3 years by one man, Takeyoshi Sato, and they were absolutely jaw-dropping for the time. But the game hasn't aged as gracefully as the sequels. Resident Evil was cleverly cutting corners of console limitations by using pre-rendered backgrounds instead of fully 3D rendered environments. They were doing this all the way up until the 2002 remake, one of the most visually stunning games ever made. Silent Hill 1 was ambitious for the time, but creating a detailed, realistic 3D world was demanding for the PS1's hardware. Shinji Mikami remade the first Resident Evil pretty early for this reason. RE2 and RE3 held up where the first one didn't quite feel complete. Silent Hill's dev team was made up of devs pulled from less notable projects, interns, new hires, and no names in the industry, often scouting college campuses for new talent. Keiichiro Toriyama was tasked by Konami to create a new horror IP, but many of the devs that worked on Silent Hill would become household names in gaming moving forward. Akira Yamaoka, for example, was the lead sound designer for the first 4 Silent Hill titles and still works on the games to this day. Yamaoka was a punk rock guitarist who didn't know any theory or how to read sheet music, but he felt he was the only one who could score Silent Hill. The original iconic Silent Hill theme wasn't actually written by Yamaoka, as he came into the project later in development. He gracefully completed the OST to Silent Hill 1 when he joined the team, and later defined a style of blending 90s alternative rock with moody lo-fi hip-hop. Bands like Portishead, Smashing Pumpkins, and other 90s alt groups seem to be a major influence. His vision and touch is sewn into the fabric of Silent Hill's atmosphere. 90s alternative blended into psychological horror worked on a lot of levels. The feeling it created was unique and introspective, artistic and nuanced. Compared to something like Resident Evil, which had a more classic horror feel, tense orchestral strings with brooding synth layers. The music of Silent Hill was fresh and new. An important piece of the recipe for Silent Hill's carefully crafted design. The music itself tells a story and creates a narrative. Deep aura and vibes that transports the listener to a town called Silent Hill. Yamaoka has been criticized for his use of sample packs that were available in the 2000s, but it's more about how he used them, blending his own original work with thoughtfully selected samples, very common in hip-hop and music production as a whole. Give someone else the exact same sample packs, and I promise they aren't going to make the Silent Hill 2 OST. Silent Hill's world and art style was defined in the first game. Stephen King's The Mist, often cited as the first main inspiration by the creator. But the art direction was heavily influenced by a film called Jacob's Ladder. Jacob's Ladder follows a Vietnam veteran who is suffering from PTSD. As he traverses the doom and gloom streets of 1970s New York, he's haunted by visions of apparitions with different flavors of Silent Hill-style body horror. Faceless humanoid creatures vibrating behind cages and fenced areas. 1970s New York was a dark and depressing time. This scene and setting of the film is a perfect backdrop for a psychological horror, and a clear inspiration for Silent Hill. Konami had sent developers to scout Midwest America, the small-town Midwest vibe mixed with Stephen King's foggy coastal setting, the gritty 1970s New York, with a blend of other pop culture influences. The occult and conspiracy theories were huge in the 90s. Shows like The X-Files and Twin Peaks had a certain aura that blended many of these traits. I often notice references from both shows in Silent Hill. Even more lighthearted stuff like Charmed and Buffy found its way into Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill's dev team found its footing through the development of the first game, and after its success, a sequel was inevitable. Silent Hill 2 began development in June 1999. By this point, the members of Team Silent were comfortable in defined roles. They had an entire game's worth of experience, and 3 leads of the project would go on to create what many consider a deeply sophisticated masterpiece, rivaling the works of David Lynch and other avant-garde artists. Silent Hill 2 would capitalize on the power of the PlayStation 2, enabling them to create a timeless look and feel. Fully realized 3D world with cinematic shifting camera and detailed art design. A haunted, vivid atmosphere mixed with Yamaoka's unique musical vision. Mature storytelling with complex themes and interesting dialogue. A game that would spawn divisive takes and prolific conversation for the next 20 years. A game with so many layers that the dev's intended meaning isn't even the end of the conversation. There are so many different ways to interpret Silent Hill 2. Each person playing will have a different perspective depending on life experience. The characters James meets all have different complex psychological trauma. You see the world through James' eyes, but it goes much deeper. This kind of complex writing was fresh for a video game. Not that it never happened before, but the pieces fell into place in a way that created a perfect psychological horror experience. Each key dev of Team Silent deserves a dedicated breakdown and analysis. As a musician, I identify with Yamaoka. Silent Hill 2's OST is brilliant. It's the vibe and atmosphere that gets you immersed. It's the way it's mixed and produced. It's just saturating. You can feel yourself sinking into the world. It's like an opiate. The instruments and tone, the chord progressions, the arrangements, the tempo and feel, it's all perfect. Ocean wave dreamlike synths wash over the player and perfectly sync with the color palette of emotion. I was 11 years old when Silent Hill 2 released, and it's honestly a lot to digest at that age. The game works as a surface level survival horror, but even at that age I could tell there was a lot more going on. It was mostly just a really scary, weird game as a kid, and I liked the soundtrack a lot. But something kept bringing me back. Every playthrough had me going down different rabbit holes of thought. Unlike Resident Evil, the gameplay was secondary to the narrative. I had already been deeply invested in other survival horror games, speedrunning, having fun mopping zombies, but Silent Hill was different, and especially Silent Hill 2. I feel Silent Hill 2 went beyond the intended meaning in a lot of ways, and that's what great art is all about. You hear an interesting lyric by Kurt Cobain and everybody has all these different complex takes, and then Kurt will say something like, "Well, I wasn't really thinking that hard about it." Great art is like that. It comes from another place. It flows naturally in an organic way through different people. David Lynch, Del Toro, Billy Corgan, I've heard them all describe art like this. It's like a zeitgeist, one human conscious where ideas flow in and out of people. The meaning is almost out of the artist's control. It's unfolding as they create it. Who it's for and what it means is fluid. Silent Hill 2 is a rare case where this was happening to an entire dev team at the same time. It's magic that can't be replicated or forced. In Silent Hill 2, you play as James. After receiving a mysterious letter from your dead wife Mary, telling you to revisit their special place in Silent Hill, James goes there to investigate. The game starts quickly with little exposition. In your inventory is the letter from Mary, which James says is impossible, and a photo of Mary that reads, "When she was healthy." Right away, the scene is set, and James has a very somber, almost defeated vibe. He doesn't know why he's there, and everything has this dream-like quality to it. Much like David Lynch film, there's a sense of mystery and foreboding. Early in the game, you meet Angela, who has come to Silent Hill to search for her mother. She acts very strange, and there's this uncanny valley aspect. Once you get into the town from the outskirts, you find these Jacob Ladder-style, faceless humanoid creatures walking around. James seems unbothered and undeterred. Even after seeing several dead bodies, his reactions aren't quite what you would expect. And right away it almost feels like the monsters aren't really trying to kill you. They walk towards you and crawl around in bizarre ways, but everything is easily avoidable. I think this was intentional and has meaning. The faceless enemy types are kind of like a metaphor for James blocking out the image of Mary that he has in his mind, or at least how he was the last time he saw her. They have no mouth, so they cannot breathe. They have no eyes because James doesn't want to see. He has immense guilt. Each person in Silent Hill experiences it differently. Later in the game, you find out that Angela sees everything in flames, which would explain her odd behavior. They're all dealing with different kinds of trauma, and the town is showing them apparitions relevant to the trauma. But James is the main character, and I believe it works kind of like The Shining. The different areas and buildings hold different memories. And while James is on his own journey, he sees and interacts with monsters relevant to other people and places. The nurses in the hospital could be aggressive towards you because they're angry. It's like the living memory of the events in Silent Hill 1. The actual building is haunted in its own way, just like the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. Perhaps like Danny, the characters in Silent Hill 2 can sort of shine because of their life trauma. They've tapped into something that lets them interact with the spirit world. One interesting theory of The Shining is that Danny is the link. He can shine and is causing Jack to see the apparitions relevant to the hotel's history. Danny is angry about the abuse he's endured from his father, and Jack is facing his guilt while going crazy. This is unique to the film version though. In Silent Hill 2, the character Angela dealt with sexual abuse growing up. So when you see monsters that are tied down to a bed, hanging from the ceiling and shambling around, they're not only relevant to Angela's trauma, but also the guilt James has for what happened to Mary. It's a very clever and sophisticated design from a narrative perspective. James suffocated Mary on her deathbed, and Angela was abused in her bed growing up. Really something you would see from a seasoned, mature film director or writer. When I say the moment video games truly became art, these are the kind of nuanced layers that I'm talking about. But these interpretations that I had are only little bits and pieces of everything going on in Silent Hill 2. If I remember right, Silent Hill 2 was originally going to have multiple playable characters, which makes sense considering all of them have so much depth and nuance in their writing. At a certain point in the game, James meets Maria, who seems to be an apparition of James' dead wife Mary, except Maria is a more forward, sexualized version of Mary. He thinks it is his wife until she makes an uncomfortable advance towards him. Men often imagine more sexualized versions of their partners, and it's something you think you want until it happens. Maria is kind of sexy, and it might be implied that she's a stripper, but there's something off about her. She's a bit rough around the edges and has this devilish, uncanny tone to the way she speaks and acts. James has guilt because while his wife was sick, he was selfishly imagining a hypersexualized version of her. Maria starts showing symptoms of the same sickness that Mary had. James would do anything to see his wife the way she was, but the town is reflecting his inner guilt and guiding him through a kind of purgatory. The iconic monster Pyramid Head has been a controversial topic of discussion in the community. What is he? What does he mean? Or what does he represent? My initial interpretation was that Pyramid Head is acting as a guide for James, a sort of Dante's Inferno Virgil situation. Like the faceless humanoid monsters, Pyramid Head is never really trying to kill James. It's more about the journey and confronting the subconscious. When James first meets Pyramid Head, he seems to be sexually abusing the mannequins. Pyramid Head's design is a combination of James' desired version of himself and the guilt he has for suffocating his wife. Pyramid Head has this chiseled, defined masculine body, yet his face is covered. No eyes and no mouth. Pyramid Head actually makes a gesture as if it's trying to pull the metal piece off its face, almost like it's struggling to breathe. I think this is commenting on how James killed Mary. But as I stated, this has been a topic of debate. I've seen many different interpretations of the game and Pyramid Head. I'm only describing how I saw it on my initial runs. The original designer of Red Devil Pyramid Thing had been drawing similar faceless style monsters far before his time working on Silent Hill 2. Pyramid Head has been described as an angel on James' shoulder and the other monsters as devils. But there's a lot of cut Pyramid Head content in the game, and certain appearances and themes were moved around or changed. Another reason there's so much conversation about it. Remember, as some of the developers have said, because it's the game. On a side note, devs of Silent Hill 2 often lament the creation of Pyramid Head. The monster became so iconic that Konami sees it as essential to the success of the franchise. Pyramid Head's design and meaning was personal to James and Silent Hill 2's story. But Konami forces devs to bring the monster back over and over, even though it doesn't really make too much sense. It's really just another reason why the legend of Team Silent exists in the first place. Those devs were carefully crafting the narrative of each game. The art and music was all personal to each story. After Silent Hill 4, the core group of devs had changed enough for it to no longer resemble what people would consider Team Silent. Subsequent sequels would come off more like soulless derivative cash grabs, no longer retaining the artistry, care, and the maturity of the first 4 games. Akira Yamaoka would take a more leading role in future projects, but as much as I love the guy, the vision was a product of the entire Team Silent. My favorite interpretation of Silent Hill 2 has to do with Andrei Tarkovsky's 1972 film Solaris. Solaris is a psychological introspective cinematic masterpiece, a science fiction film that follows a research station orbiting a planet called Solaris. Solaris is completely covered with a gelatinous ocean that seems to be one living organism. The planet tries to communicate with the researchers by creating mental projections of their subconscious. These apparitions are so vivid and lifelike that they themselves question the meaning of their existence. Much like Maria in Silent Hill 2, who is only a fabrication from James' memory, she is also confused and acts strange. She's not the real Mary, only the town pulling bits and pieces from James' mind. Imagine waking up one day, but everything that makes you who you are is fragmented. Your thoughts and feelings are made from someone else's mental version of yourself. Cold sweats, anxiety, panic, rapid mood swings, attempts to take your own life out of frustration. Just like Maria dies and returns in Silent Hill, so does the main character's wife in Solaris. It brings into question, what does it mean to really be alive? What constitutes a living being? Chris Kelvin is a psychologist who travels to the research station to investigate the strange happenings. Just like James, who seems to be called to Silent Hill in a mysterious way, Chris finds himself alone and isolated on the research station. There are 2 other researchers who had already been there, but they seem to be acting abnormally. paranoid, antagonistic, and secretive. Very similar to Eddie and Angela in Silent Hill 2. They're battling their own demons. Solaris, like Silent Hill, is pulling images and apparitions from their subconscious and past. But where Solaris seems to be only trying to communicate, Silent Hill is acting more like therapy. James and Eddie are both psychopaths with deep repressed guilt. The town is guiding them to a point where they can accept what they've done. Chris Kelvin sees an apparition of his own dead wife. When he first encounters her, she lays on top of him in a passionate moment. He's confused but doesn't resist. His guilt is less extreme than James. James killed his wife. Chris only neglected her to pursue his work. Chris eventually tries to kill the apparition by stuffing her in a shuttle and launching her into space, only for her to return acting more strange and erratic. One of the other scientists explains how he's been killing his apparitions over and over in different ways. Solaris is not only a major narrative influence to Silent Hill, but it's also a cinematic and visual one. Stanley Kubrick films are heavily influenced by 1970s Soviet cinema and Andrei Tarkovsky. The opening to Solaris has Chris walking through a clouded and misty Russian countryside. The cinematography is very similar to what you might see in a Silent Hill game. Along with David Lynch's entire catalog and other avant-garde influences, Silent Hill 2 is a pure work of art, a generational piece that can only exist as a snapshot in time, a 10 out of 10 masterpiece and a gift that keeps on giving. What Team Silent accomplished is truly incredible, something that has deeply resonated with many fans who also enjoy the work that influenced it. Silent Hill 2 has several different endings and there's a lot more to unpack. Born from a Wish is a side DLC, I guess, that you play as Maria, and there's a early scene where she's looking in the mirror and she is questioning her existence, why she's there. It's very profound. As with Solaris, I won't spoil everything in this video. Maybe you're new to Silent Hill 2 or this video has inspired you to take a deeper dive. I highly recommend checking out some of the David Lynch films, Jacob's Ladder, and The Shining. Silent Hill 2 is a game that really wears its influence on its sleeve, and I think checking out some of the things that inspired it visually and the narrative really helps you gain a better understanding of what the devs were trying to show you. Like I said, Silent Hill is more like a avant-garde student film made by a bunch of film nerds, and they're really trying to show you a specific style. Yeah. If you've enjoyed this video or found any of this interesting, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching.